So in this yin yoga practice, we will be doing back bends and forward folds to encourage circulation in the lower back. And our first pose, as it always is in my sequences, can be butterfly pose, which you can take from a seated position, adding a forward fold to it, or you can lie back, in which case there's a little compression in the low back. It's basically a slight back bend. No matter which you decide, sitting up or lying back with the torso, the legs are generally in this position. Soles of the feet together, knees out wide. Perhaps some soft cushioning underneath the knees if you want to be protective of hip or knee joints. If you take the forward fold, not pulling yourself forward strongly, but just leaning into the field of gravity and finding supports. I really have loved placing my elbows on my shins lately and just cupping my chin in my hands as a support, but I know some of you will put a block on your feet to hold up the forehead, or by playing Legos, find some sort of structure with some props that will hold you up. If you're lying back, you might draw your feet in a little bit. Sitting up, you push the feet well forward of the torso so you have the big diamond shape. Settling in to this shape. We need not impose an ambitious physical agenda here. We'll regulate how much sensation we'll tolerate and how long we'll stay in each pose, each of us for ourselves. No forcing, no straining, no pushing, just resting, bringing awareness, attention into the body. Simply doing that will revitalize a sense of depletion or connect us back home to a sense of inner ground when we may have felt disconnected. So I stay sitting up so you can hear my voice, but you are dwelling in your pose now. And as we do, keeping our attention in the body, paying attention, kind attention to what it's like to inhabit the physical body with the ease and the ache. You might sense spaciousness within, or a sense of busyness, a sense of circulation, here and there some pressure or some tingling. This relaxed attention begins the process of renourishment on many levels. In a few more moments, I will strike the bowl 3 times to signal the end of the pose. It's just a suggestion. You can always move away from the pose before I strike the bowl. You can always stay longer after I strike the bowl. Please be sure to move through the practice in a way that is responsive to your needs. So when you move away from the pose, depending on how you were in the pose, find a neutral position. It might be lying on your back if you were already on your back, just stretching the legs out. Or if you were seated and in a forward fold, maybe just come up and stretch the legs out and lean back on the hands. This is not a pose so much as a transition, but the transitions deserve just as much mindful attention as the poses themselves. And in fact, it can be quite interesting and illuminating to feel the diminishment or the evolution, the dissipation of sensations that seemed really strong when you were in the pose. So stay as long as you'd like in this neutral position, and when you feel ready to move on, I'll suggest our first back bend. We can do one of the yin back bends that's done by lying on the front of the body. So Sphinx or Seal are the common poses. In Sphinx, the elbows are beneath the shoulders, lifting up the rib cage, creating compression in the low back. The feet can be closer together or further apart. The elbows can be further forward if you'd like less of an arch in the back, or they might be on a prop or two in order to raise them up and increase the arch in the back. You can also do that by taking the hands out, pressing the elbows up. So that would be Seal pose. Slightly different back bend. So as before, I encourage you to find a position that works for you and settle in, and I will sit up so you can hear me. You might think of each pose as a new set of circumstances and a new opportunity to, under new circumstances, see how the body is and see what it's like to apply mindful attention. These sensations will be different. Perhaps a sense of circulation will be different, or there will be warmth or tingling in different areas than before. And so you can track sensation, follow what's happening on the physical level with your attention. There's this saying, where attention goes, chi flows. Chi being the energy, healthy energy that we hope is freely flowing through the body, but can become depleted or stagnant. So with that in mind, you might bring your attention purposefully to an area of the body that has felt vulnerable or was previously injured, where you would like extra nourishment. Where attention goes, chi flows. So bringing that life force, that healing energy to the areas of the body that could use some more support. From where you are on the floor, you might just take your hands down, your elbows out, coming out of the back bend and resting the forehead on the backs of the hands for a spell. Basically removing the extension of the spine, the back bend. And you might take a few cycles of breath now as you're lying on the front of the body. A few cycles of breath where you purposefully enhance your inhale so it becomes physically more expansive, and you could feel the belly pressing down into the floor and the side waists moving outward and the low back lifting up toward the ceiling when you expand in all directions on your inhale, and then on your exhale let everything recede back to its original position. A few cycles of breath like that. You might be elongating your inhales and exhales till they're about 5 or 6 seconds long each, just for a short spell here before we move into our next pose. There may be sensations associated with breathing in that way, sensations through the mid-body, maybe in the low back. And take your attention to them as you breathe. And when you feel ready to take up the next pose, make your way up to sit. Take your time. For our next pose, I'm going to suggest half dragonfly. So dragonfly is the pose where we're sitting up and we take our feet well away from each other. So half dragonfly is only one leg out. So it might be when you draw one foot in, and it doesn't matter which side you start on. But when you take one foot in, it might be that leg's knee is up a little bit off the floor, in which case I recommend putting some padding underneath the knee, filling that space between the floor and the knee. And some people like to do, this will be a forward fold toward the outstretched leg. So some people like to take the bent knee way back. So there's a twist involved here as you sort of turn toward the extended leg before you take the forward fold. I don't do that so much. I keep the knee in. I'm a little bit more square as I face with my pelvis, as I face the outstretched leg. You might take an inhale and get tall in the spine, but then not enforce a tall spine. As you come forward, you are hinging at the hips, but you do allow your back to round to some degree in yin. We're not insisting on that flat back and the forward facing sternum and pulling down like we might in a yang yoga practice. This is a little bit softer and more receptive. So you can let the head hang. You can place blocks underneath your elbows if that would be a good system of support for you on either side of the front leg. Something like this. If you have a bolster on the blocks can be nice. And this can look so many different ways. So I just encourage you to find what works for you. So I'm going to come up to sit so you can hear me, but again, as with all of our yin poses, you'll find what feels appropriate to you. Come to stillness and stay. Before you settle in too much, if you are someone who has a knee back that's lifted away from the floor, it's not a problem, but you might purposely fill that space. You might also sit up on something. It's good to have blankets and pillows around and be willing to use them to fill spaces, to lift sit bones, to soften the way you can lean into the pose. So we've spent the first two poses practicing mindfulness of the body. And after the last pose, we started to breathe in a more purposeful but not effortful way. 5 or 6 second long inhales and exhales. And I'm going to suggest for this and our next pose to take up that method, to be breathing purposefully in a slow, smooth, steady way. On your inhales, note how you're receiving from the environment, bringing in breath. And on your exhales, when the breath leaves, you can imagine letting go of anything you don't need, anything that's not serving you in body or heart or mind. So inhaling, intake, good nourishment from the environment, and exhaling, letting go what you don't need. So take all the time you'd like in that pose. When you come out, you might be in a neutral position for a few moments with the knees drawn in and up. And of course, whenever you feel ready to take up the next pose, it is half dragonfly on the other side. When you move into it freshly. Just see as you extend the other leg out and draw the opposite foot in, what happens with that knee? Would a soft prop underneath it be useful? Would you like the leg out to the side and then turning toward it with a rotating the spine and bringing your sternum toward that leg and leaning forward and down? Or will you be more square to begin with, already with the pelvis itself facing the leg rather than away with the leg back? And then just see as you lean forward into the field of gravity. Again, there's no physical agenda in this practice, so we're not trying to get anywhere, and so we don't pull ourselves down. So as we lean forward, when you get where you're going, what sort of prop would help you stay there? Blocks, blankets. And on this side, just see what it would be like if, while you're in the pose, not only do you steady your breath, but you steady your gaze. What if you were to keep your eyes open, maybe gazing at the toes of the extended leg or something else, but resting your gaze. A restful, steady gaze, restful, steady breath. And see what that does to the body and the mind. There might be a stabilizing effect. There might be a stronger sense of here-ness, now-ness. In our back bends and forward folds in Yin Yoga, we are purposefully trying to nourish the kidneys. The kidneys store our essence energy and govern our overall vitality. They're responsible for balancing fluids and mood and appetite. And when, from the point of view of traditional Chinese medicine and the Taoists, when the kidneys are healthy and there's plenty of freely flowing kidney qi through the meridians, then we have a healthy sense of will. We aren't so easily influenced. Our limbic system is cool. We are present. While we don't diagnose or treat with Yin Yoga, it can be an act of self-care on those days where we identify our energy as being quite taxed or depleted. It can be just an act of self-care to do a bit of a kidney Yin Yoga practice. Just as a way to indicate to ourselves, yes, I want to respond to this sense of tiredness, and I'd like to nourish and replete my energy. So forward folds and back bends. And for a few more moments here, a steady gaze and a steady breath. So I'd like to offer a few options for the last pose before Shavasana. I had a back bend planned, called bridge, supported bridge pose, for which you will need a rolled blanket or a block. But some of you are probably in environments where you're near a wall that has nothing on it. I am not, but if you are near a wall that has nothing on it, Legs up the wall might be a nice option for the second to last pose instead. So I'll demonstrate both. I don't have the wall, but if you can imagine my couch here being a wall, you can come up right next to it and swing your legs. If it were a wall, my legs would be straight up against, but I've got the couch, so I'll bend them. And lying back here. Now this pose can be done as I'm showing you, or it can be done with a block inserted underneath the sacrum so that there's a bit of a lift. Then the other pose I was suggesting, bridge pose, is done from the back. Soles of the feet on the mat, lifting the hips up and inserting a block at any height that feels appropriate for you underneath the sacrum, the very low spine. So something like this. Either of those poses or anything else it feels like your body would need before Shavasana. The last two poses, we were breathing steadily, smoothly, slowly. And if you are still doing that, maybe starting to let that go, and letting the breath rest into its own natural rhythm. Coming back into whole body awareness, mindful of how the body feels without organizing things in a certain way or fixing anything or requiring the breath to be at a certain pace or depth. Just letting everything be again. I'd like to offer some words from Rilke. Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves. Do not seek the answers that cannot be given you, because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into answers. Stay as long as you'd like, and when you do move, gently, mindfully adjusting your position and coming into rest for Shavasana. Perhaps lying on your back, maybe rolling up a blanket underneath the backs of the knees, or a bit of blanket or pillow under the head. A blanket just for a little bit of weightedness across the mid-body can be nice. Rest your eyes. Rest your breath. Rest your body. If it's comfortable enough, the mouth is gently closed and you are breathing through the nose. The breath has its own natural rhythm and you can attune to it and let that rhythm soothe you. The body is relaxed, the mind is gently alert. For our last minute here, you might whisper or recite inwardly a few phrases of loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Repeating at whatever pace you'd like, as many times as you'd like. The first phrase is, may we be safe and healthy. The next phrase, may we be free from suffering. The next phrase, may we experience happiness and joy. The next phrase, may our hearts be in peace. May it be so.